Good morning, old bull here. They say, no regrets, like it's a badge of honor. Like admitting you've done wrong makes you weak. But let me ask you something. How can a man grow if he never looks back? How can he build a better life if he keeps pretending he's never broken anything? In a world that glorifies moving on without reflection, I'm here to tell you the truth. The man who doesn't feel regret is either lying to himself or already lost. Regret doesn't make you soft. It makes you dangerous in all the right ways because it teaches you where not to step next time. It sharpens your discipline, deepens your empathy, and protects the people under your care. This video isn't about guilt that cripples. It's about regret that refines. It's about the firewood of old mistakes that, when burned right, can warm an entire camp of wisdom. If you've ever looked in a mirror and wished you'd done things differently, then good. That means you're still alive inside. That means you're still in the fight. So pour yourself a coffee. Light that cigar. And let's talk about the kind of regret that doesn't destroy a man, but rebuilds him from the inside out. There's a certain kind of silence that settles in when a man sits by the fire at the end of a long day. Boots off, rifle leaned against the wall, coffee cooling in a tin mug. It's in that silence where regret often shows up. Uninvited, unrelenting. But I'll tell you something few folks will admit. Regret isn't your enemy. It's a teacher. And in many cases, the most honest one you'll ever have. It's not there to shame you. It's there to sharpen you, to whisper, you can do better next time. While the world expects you to act like you've got it all figured out. A real man doesn't run from his regrets. He sits with them, learns their language, and lets them guide his next step. You see, the world likes to peddle this philosophy of no regrets. It's on bumper stickers, coffee mugs, even tattooed across chests like some kind of badge of honor. But in my experience, that kind of thinking builds hollow men. Empty shells with steel jaws and soft spines. Regret, when embraced with quiet strength and discipline, becomes one of the most powerful tools in the belt of manhood. It's like firewood in winter. At first it's rough, splintered, even painful to carry. But once you learn to stack it right, light it up, it'll warm you and those around you. Let me give you a real example. Years ago, I lost a good friend. Not because of betrayal or anything dramatic, because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. I let silence stretch between us like a canyon. And by the time I thought to build a bridge, he was already gone. That regret doesn't haunt me to hurt me. It reminds me to pick up the phone to say what needs to be said while there's still time. That's the kind of scar that teaches you to move different. That's where growth lives. Not in perfection, but in the aftermath of mistakes. Now, I'm not talking about dwelling in the past like a man lost in the forest. That'll burn you out, hollow you out, leave you stuck. What I'm saying is, when you feel that sting, when you look back and know you should have done better, that sting is sacred. It's the compass pointing you north. That ache in your chest, it's the sound of your inner fire trying to light itself again. Don't smother it with bravado. Don't numb it with distractions. Sit with it. Let it do its work. Regret, when met with reflection and humility, becomes the forge where real men are made. And the truth is, we don't become better by pretending we never fail. We become better by admitting it, owning it, and doing something about it. Every strong man you admire, every quiet warrior with scars and discipline. He didn't get that way by skating through life untouched. He got there by surviving his own choices, by turning regret into resolve. That's the kind of manhood we don't talk about enough. And if you lean into that truth, well, you just might find the strength to step into the next part of your story with more wisdom than you had yesterday. There's a strange thing I've noticed riding the trails of this modern world. Somewhere along the way, we've decided that to be strong, we have to act like we've never stumbled. That to be a real man, we have to look back on a crooked path and say, I wouldn't change a thing. But I'll tell you plain, that ain't strength. That's pride dressed up in confidence. The kind of pride that gets men stuck in cycles they don't even know they're repeating. We're living at a time where admitting you were wrong is treated like a sign of weakness, when in truth it's one of the final frontiers of strength of character. I've sat by the fire with men who've built empires, men with gear stacked in the bed of their truck, boots polished by miles walked, and hands weathered by real work. And the ones I trust most, they're the ones who look you in the eye and say, yeah, I messed that up. That kind of humility is rare now. We've built a culture obsessed with perfection and allergic to reflection. Everyone's too busy curating their image, polishing their highlight reel, pretending they've never burned the toast, let alone a whole relationship. But manhood isn't built in the filtered moments. It's carved out in the ones we'd rather not talk about. See, when you teach young men that regret is weakness, you rob them of one of life's most powerful tools. You turn their scars into secrets instead of stories. And without stories, how do they learn? We're creating a generation of warriors without wisdom because they're too afraid to look in the mirror and say, that was on me. I've seen more courage in a man who admits he failed than in 100 who pretend they never have. There's a reason the old cowboys used to sit in silence before they spoke, because they were weighing their mistakes before offering advice. This modern gospel of no regrets is not only hollow, it's dangerous. It leads men to carry their failures like dead weight, buried under the surface, never addressed, never healed, and buried things have a way of rotting. A man who won't face his past becomes a danger to his present. You've probably seen it. Quiet anger, misplaced blame, relationships falling apart and no one knows why. It's because we've told men to outrun their past instead of learning how to walk with it in peace. We've traded accountability for affirmation, truth for image. And so, here we are, surrounded by voices telling us to move on without ever asking what we've learned. Surrounded by noise that says being wrong is a flaw instead of a part of being human. But if we keep going down that road, we'll raise men who don't know how to say I'm sorry, who don't know how to ask for forgiveness, who don't know how to forgive themselves. And if a man doesn't know how to do those things, how's he supposed to build a legacy? How's he supposed to be a husband, a father, a leader? That's why the next thing we need to look at is the true purpose of regret, not just for us, but for the people walking this life alongside us. Regret, when seen through the right lens, isn't a chain around your ankle. It's a compass. It doesn't just tell you where you've been. It points to where you should never go again, especially when it comes to the people walking beside you. See, a lot of folks think regret is a private emotion, something that only affects the man feeling it. But I've lived long enough to know that's not true. Regret has a social weight. It shapes how we love, how we lead, how we protect those around us. When a man learns to feel the sting of what he's done to others, he becomes more careful with the hands he uses to carry them. There was a time I lost my temper with someone close. Didn't hit, didn't scream, just let my silence become a wall they couldn't climb. At the time, I thought I was justified, thought I was showing strength. But looking back, I see it for what it was. Weakness, hiding behind pride. The regret I carry for that moment didn't teach me how to be a better talker. It taught me how to listen. And more than that, it taught me how to see. To really see the people I care about. That kind of regret is like firewood in the soul. It fuels a quiet strength that burns steady, not wild. There's a reason real men walk a little slower with age. It's not just the knees. It's because we've hurt people before. And we've learned that words land like bullets when they're fired without care. Regret makes you cautious, not cowardly, but compassionate. It puts a weight on your decisions that makes you think twice before speaking harshly, before walking away, before disappointing someone who needed you to show up. And let me tell you, that weight is holy. It's what separates the brute from the protector, the fool from the wise man. If you've ever stood over a cold campfire with someone you love, wishing you could unsay something, undo something, you know what I'm talking about. That ache in your chest, that's not weakness. That's your soul remembering its responsibility. Regret teaches empathy, and empathy is how a man builds not just a home, but a legacy. It's how a grandfather earns his stories, how a husband softens his edge, how a father raises a son who knows how to feel without being consumed by the feeling. You can't learn that kind of wisdom from books. It has to be lived, sometimes painfully. And here's the part they don't tell you. The men who've never let themselves feel regret. They're dangerous. Not because they're evil, but because they're blind. Blind to the ripple effects of their actions. Blind to the emotional bruises left behind. Blind to the quiet sacrifices others made for them. Regret is the thing that keeps your boots planted when your ego tells you to run. It's the voice that says, you've hurt someone before. Don't do it again. And that's why we need to talk next about what happens when that voice goes silent, when regret is replaced with recklessness, and reflection is swallowed up by pride. There's a danger in the world today that's louder than gunfire, but just as deadly. And it's the man who never looks in the mirror. Not the kind of mirror that shows your beard or your boots, but the kind that shows your soul. When a man walks through life without pausing to reflect, without stopping to ask himself, did I handle that right? He starts to believe he's always right. And, brother, that's when the rot sets in. A man who never questions his actions slowly becomes a danger to others and a stranger to himself. Self-reflection is like checking your gear before heading out on a horse trail. You don't wait until the saddle snaps or the rope gives out halfway up the mountain. You check it. You test it. You make adjustments before the weight becomes too much. Same goes for your spirit. If you never take the time to examine your anger, your pride, your decisions, then you'll find yourself snapping under pressure. You'll lash out at your wife for something your boss said. You'll punish your kids for mistakes you made yourself, and you won't even see it happening. I've met plenty of strong men who could break a log in half with an axe swing, but couldn't say the words, "I was wrong." Men like that end up isolated. They might build empires, but they die alone. Because without a reflection, a man starts building walls instead of bridges. He loses the ability to empathize, to adjust, to evolve. He starts treating people like tools, useful when they serve a purpose, disposable when they don't. And when a man gets to that point, regret can't even find a door to enter. He's locked himself in with his ego and thrown away the key. Think of it like a truck that's never had an oil change. It might run for a while, maybe even look good on the outside, but sooner or later, something's going to seize up. Reflection is your maintenance. It keeps the inner fire burning clean, not wild. It allows a man to stay strong without becoming brittle, to be confident without being cruel. And if you don't take time to check in with your own soul, your soul will eventually check out on you. That's when the real trouble starts. Not just in your life, but in the lives of everyone, depending on you to stay grounded. Because here's the hard truth. A man who refuses to reflect becomes reactive. And a reactive man is unpredictable. He's the kind of man who punches a hole in the wall instead of having a hard conversation. The kind who walks away instead of apologizing. Who blames everyone else when the weight gets too heavy, instead of admitting he packed it wrong. And if we let that kind of man lead our families, our communities, our generation, then we're building our future on a cracked foundation. That's why we've got to explore next what separates guilt that heals from guilt that destroys. Because knowing you've made mistakes is only half the battle. Knowing what to do with that knowledge. Now that's where manhood really begins. There's a fine line between guilt and regret. And most men I know have walked it without realizing where their boots were landing. Guilt, when it's left untamed, is a poison. It seeps in through your cracks and settles in your bones. It doesn't make you better, it makes you bitter. You start to believe that because you failed once, you'll fail again. That you're not worthy of forgiveness. That you're broken beyond repair. That kind of guilt doesn't shape a man. It buries him. But regret, when it's balanced with reflection and humility, has the power to do something guilt never will. Build strength from sorrow. I've carried guilt like a sack of wet firewood in the rain, heavy, cold, and pointless. I've let it ruin quiet nights by the fire, good conversations, even chances at redemption. That kind of guilt whispers lies. You're the problem. You'll never change. Might as well keep doing what you're doing. It drags a man backward, makes him doubt the very ground he stands on. Constructive regret, though, that's different. It looks back just long enough to learn, then turns forward with clarity. It's not a chain around your neck. It's a compass in your hand. You know you're dealing with healthy regret when it comes with humility and not self-loathing. When you can say, I should have done better, without adding, and I'm worthless because of it. I've talked to many a young man who confused regret with shame, but shame makes you hide. Regret invites you to grow. Shame says, you heard a mistake. Regret says, you made a mistake. Now make it right. The first will lock you in a prison of silence. The second might just hand you the key. If you've ever sat under the stars with a cigar in your hand, thinking about the man you used to be, you know what I mean. Maybe you lost your temper with someone who didn't deserve it. Maybe you walked away when You should have stayed. That ache in your chest, that's regret knocking. And if you're wise, you'll open the door. You'll let it sit down beside you and teach you something. You won't let it burn you. You'll let it brand you. Quiet reminder that next time you'll be better. And that's the mark of a real man. A man who remembers without being ruled by the memory. So here's what I've learned. Guilt asks you to dwell. Regret asks you to do better. And the difference between the two is what you do after you feel them. Do you wallow or do you rise again? Scarred, but stronger. If you've got things in your past that still haunt you, good. That means you've got a conscience. Now use it and let that regret shape your choices, not choke your future. Because next, we're going to talk about what that kind of growth really looks like. When you start looking at your past not with shame, but with the eyes of a man who's ready to grow. A proud man walks tall, but a humble man walks wisely. And friend, I've been both. I used to think strength meant never backing down, never showing weakness, never admitting fault. But over the years, around campfires, under starry skies, behind the wheel of a tired old truck, I started seeing things different. Humility isn't the absence of strength. It's what anchors real strength in place. It's the quiet recognition that you don't know it all. You haven't done it all right. And there's still more learning to be done. A strong man might cut through a forest. A humble man knows when to stop and sharpen the axe. I've watched proud men fall, good men but blind. They couldn't apologize, couldn't admit they were wrong, couldn't bend their spine an inch, even when the weight of their mistakes was grinding their bones. And when they finally cracked, they cracked hard. But the humble ones, the older man who listens more than he speaks, the quiet strength behind a stoic man's gaze, those men build things that last, families, friendships, faith. They're like seasoned saddle leather, worn but unbreakable. Humility comes from a place of reflection. It comes when you look at your past with clear eyes and say, yeah, I messed that up, but I've learned. It's when you step back from a fight because peace is more important than pride. It's when you offer your hand first, even if you were right, because being right isn't the goal. Being good is. I've had to eat crow more than once. Doesn't taste great, but it's a meal that feeds the soul. Better that than choking on your own arrogance. You see, humility makes room for growth. It's what separates the cowboy from the wild colt, the man from the boy, the warrior from the brute. Humility teaches a man to serve instead of dominate, to listen instead of bark, to lead by example instead of command. It's what makes a father raise his kids with patience, a husband love his wife with kindness, a mentor speak truth without ego. Without humility, discipline becomes cruelty, and leadership turns into control. The more life humbles you, the more you start to see that we're all just trying to carry our own firewood, some with trembling hands, some with tired backs. Humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. It means helping the next man up the trail, even when your own boots are worn thin. And once you've tasted the stillness that humility brings, you'll start to crave it more than applause. That's where real manhood takes root. And it's also where we begin to understand the difference between knowing yourself and being ruled by your ego. And that's the ground we're going to walk together next. There's a fine line between knowing who you are and thinking the world revolves around you. And the older I get, the more I see how easy it is to cross that line without even noticing. Self-awareness is a mirror. It shows you what's there, not what you wish was there. It forces you to look at your scars, your patterns, your blind spots. It humbles you. But egocentrism, that's a funhouse mirror. It makes everything about you look bigger, more important, more righteous than it really is. And when you're lost in that reflection, it's real hard to see the wreckage you're leaving behind. A self-aware man knows when to stop talking and start listening. He knows when he's projecting, when he's blaming others for what he hasn't healed in himself. He catches himself when he's about to speak from pride instead of wisdom. I've sat across from younger men, eyes full of rage and ambition, thinking every setback in life was someone else's fault. And I've told them, that fire you're carrying, if you don't learn to tend it, it'll burn your house down before it ever warms your bones. The danger of egocentrism is that it masquerades as confidence. It tells you that being loud means being right, that being admired means being worthy. But admiration is cheap these days. You can buy likes. You can fake status. What you can't fake is depth. A self-aware man doesn't need to be the loudest voice in the room because he's made peace with his silence. He doesn't puff his chest to feel strong. He puts his hands to work and lets the results speak for themselves. Think of it like this. A campfire that's all smoke and no flame is useless. It chokes everyone around it. But a fire that's tended with care, with intention, the fire gives light, warmth, comfort. Same with your character. If you burn for attention, your smoke will drive folks away. But if you burn from purpose, your presence will draw people in without you needing to say a word. That's the difference between ego and essence. One demands to be seen. The other serves where it stands. Self-awareness asks hard questions. Why did I say that? Why did I react that way? What fear was I really running from in that moment? It invites you into a place of solitude and reflection. Not to beat yourself up, but to get honest enough to grow. Because a man who knows himself is a man who can master himself. And when you've got that kind of mastery, that quiet strength, you become the kind of man others trust when life gets loud. And that, my friend, leads us into one of the greatest defenses a man can ever have. Regret as a compass to never repeat his own mistakes. Regret is a heavy thing, I'll give you that. It sits on your chest like a wet saddle blanket after a cold ride through the rain. But what most folks don't realize is it ain't just a burden. It's a map. It points backward, yes, but only so you can ride smarter, moving forward. A man who learns from his regret sharpens his instincts. He doesn't ignore the pain. He studies it. He listens to the echo of his past decisions and lets that echo shape a better silence ahead. And that's what separates a real man from one who just grows older without growing wiser. I've made choices I'd give anything to take back. Words spoken too sharp. Trust broken too fast. Roads taken out of pride instead of patience. But you know what made sure I didn't repeat those mistakes? It wasn't shame. Shame just drags you into a ditch and leaves you there. It was the sting of regret, the honest, aching kind that made me stop, set down my pride and say, not again. And once you say that, once you mean it from the soul outward, you start carrying yourself different, not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself and for those around you. I remember an old rancher I worked with in my early years. He was tough as nails, but had this way of pausing every time he was about to make a decision. He'd stare off for a second like he was listening to a voice only he could hear. I asked him once what he was thinking about. He said, "Every mistake I've ever made. They talk to me, boy, and I let them, 'cause they're the only ones that ever told me the truth." That stuck with me, because that's what regret is. It's your past trying to stop you from digging the same hole twice. You see, we live in a world now that wants to pretend like nothing matters. Make a mess, start over. Break a heart, just swipe again. Lie to someone, blame it on your trauma and move on. But that kind of living turns men into ghosts, hollow, drifting, numb to consequence. A real man carries his regret like a rifle in the wilderness, not to weigh him down, but to keep him alert, humble, ready to act with discipline instead of impulse. You don't become a stoic man by pretending you've done no wrong. You become one by choosing not to do the same wrong twice. So if you've got regrets, and I know you do, don't shove them in a drawer. Open that drawer. Look them in the eye. Ask what they're trying to teach you. Because regret, when honored and understood, becomes one of the strongest tools in a man's saddlebag. It keeps your boots on the right trail. It keeps your blade sharp and your heart cleaner. And most of all, it keeps you from having to say, "I'm sorry," for the same thing more than once. That's how you honor your scars. That's how you walk with your past without letting it lead. And that brings us to a deeper challenge. How to balance that awareness without falling into guilt that poisons your growth. You ever sit by a fire too long and realize it's either dying or burning too hot? That's how I see the balance between acceptance and responsibility. Too much acceptance, and you start excusing every fault, every failure, blaming life, blaming luck, blaming everyone but the man in the mirror. But swing too far the other way, carrying the full weight of everything wrong with the world on your shoulders, and you'll wear yourself down to a shadow. A good man, a strong man, learns to live between those two flames. He learns to hold himself accountable without crushing his soul. See, real manhood isn't about taking all the blame, nor is it about running from it. It's knowing when to say, "That was on me," and when to say, "That's not mine to carry." That takes discipline. That takes strength of character. There's a reason the older men, the ones who've walked through fire and snow, tend to speak softer. They've learned the hard way that guilt without direction becomes poison. And they've also learned that self-forgiveness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the kind of wisdom a man finds when he stares into the ashes of a mistake and doesn't look away. I've known men who got stuck in the mud of their past. Good men, but buried by guilt. Couldn't forgive themselves for something they did 20 years ago. And I've known others who ran from every consequence, who could lie to your face and sleep just fine. Neither one of those men were free. Because freedom doesn't come from pretending you did nothing wrong. And it sure as hell doesn't come from whipping yourself for eternity. It comes from facing what you've done, owning it like a man, learning from it, and then walking forward with a cleaner step and a clearer purpose. The secret is this: a man's worth isn't found in perfection. It's found in the way he recovers, in how he carries his scars, in how he shows up the next day, not because the world forgave him, but because he refused to give up on becoming better. That's where the quiet strength lives. That's what makes you a protector, a provider, a man who others can lean on when the winds howl and the snow hits hard. Not because you've never failed, but because your failures didn't kill the fire inside you. They refined it. So if you're holding on to something tonight, something you regret, something you wish you'd done better, don't let it turn into bitterness. Don't let it turn into shame that eats away at your will. Instead, let it become a reminder, a symbol of the man you're still becoming. Accept what you cannot change. Take responsibility for what you can. And then, get up, dust off, grab your gear, and keep walking. Because this trail we're on, it don't wait. And the man you're meant to be is still up ahead, waiting for you to meet him. So, now I'll leave the question with you. Do you carry your past like a wound or like a warning? Do you let it rot? Or do you let it refine you? Because the truth is, regret's not your enemy. Indifference is. A real man doesn't hide from his scars. He studies them, learns from them, and becomes the kind of man who knows better and does better. If you've made mistakes, good. That means you've lived. But now comes the part that separates the boys from the warriors. What are you going to do with that pain? Will you bury it in silence? Or turn it into wisdom you can pass down? The world needs more men who've been broken and got back up anyway. If you're still here, still breathing, still carrying weight, then you're not done yet. Let me ask you this. What's the one regret you've been running from? And what would change in your life if you had the guts to face it? If this message struck a chord, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to keep walking this road with me, reflecting, rebuilding, rising again, subscribe to Old Bull's Wisdom and turn on the notifications. We've got more ground to cover, and I'd be honored to ride alongside you